Boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, children of all ages, Games Workshop is in trouble, or maybe they're not in trouble. We're not entirely sure. There's been some interesting reports going on out there in the rumor mill and out there in the World Wide Web, because boys and girls, there's a lot of rumors out there going around about a lot of Games Workshop stores rebranding to not carry too much of the Warhammer 40k stuff anymore, especially since all the craziness happened with the Field and Custodes. But at the end of the day, you also can't deny the fact that, of course, with their upcoming Warhammer 40k series coming from Amazon and Henry Cavill, things are looking good and bright for the future of Warhammer 40k, expanding into things besides just video games and all of their tabletop stuff. Now, obviously, it looks like investors are actually thinking this is a good sign, because their stock price has absolutely spiked over there over the last month or so since the announcement actually came out. But at the exact same time, we're seeing reports of sales slumping out there and a lot of kind of crazy controversy going on. So what is really the truth? Well, boys and girls, we've got a lovely little article over here to give us a breakdown of exactly what's going on, the highs and the lows of Games Workshop and all of the kind of crazy stuff that's been going on out there. And this is exactly what we're going to check out, because as you can see over here from fandompulse.substack.com, Games Workshop stock soaring after Henry Cavill Warhammer 40k show announcement, even though fan says retailer stores brand losing ground. Now, obviously, I know I've seen a lot of other people out there in the Warhammer 40k sphere and some just like in the general kind of pop culture news take this one little report and turn it into like a big old video and all this other kind of nonsense. And I kind of like the idea that now that we know a little more information about it, and we've got a little extra thing to add into it, I think it's actually worth talking about, because obviously this is just kind of an anecdotal report out there. We haven't seen like any mass reports of this kind of stuff going on out there, but needless to say, even if there's just one store out there doing that and canceling a bunch of orders according to this one particular situation out there, well, it is a little bit of a situation, and it might show a shift in culture. And even though things might look really good to the investors out there because of the success that might come with the Warhammer 40k stuff, if it is successful, but if you end up cutting off a lot of your home-based people out there, a lot of your hardcore fans, and end up putting a sour taste in their mouth, well, it doesn't really matter how successful your show out there is if you end up losing your core audience, because we have seen that happen time and time again. Star Wars might have had some success with certain things out there, but they decided to alienate a lot of their original fan base out there, and things haven't been going very well for them at all. And of course, Games Workshop has had a lot of backlash over the last couple of years for some of the things that they've decided to do, some of the crazy lore changes. Some of the people that have issues and worries about that with the future of going forward with Warhammer 40k. I, for one, out there, I've talked about this time a lot. I'm cautiously optimistic. I'm borderline excited about the Henry Cavill Warhammer 40k series, but at the exact same time, there's a lot of giant red flags that Games Workshop overall has been throwing up over the last few years that give us a lot of cautionary note and make a lot of people end up going out there going, I don't know if I really want to continue investing in this kind of stuff going forward. So we're going to check out this article from Fandom Pulse, get into all of the juicy details and see exactly they've got going on over here, and of course go over some of the highlights real quick of the controversies, but we've also documented those a lot in the past, so we're not going to go into detail too much of those. We'll just give you a little highlights and then jump to what the relevant and new information is. But before we do, if you do enjoy our content, hit that like button, share with all your friends, and subscribe or follow if you have not already, boys and girls, because we are grinding, we are growing, and I could not do that without every single one of you. Also, leave us a comment in the section down below, letting us know what you think about all of this kind of stuff. Do you think this is all good signs for Games Workshop? Do you think they'll be able to plug along going forward? Do you think the controversy will affect them going forward? Do you think the controversy is going to get worse? Do you think Games Workshop is going to go the way a lot of these other gaming companies, whether it be video game industry, whether Hollywood, do you think they're going to end up going the same way as a lot of that kind of stuff? Or do you think they're going to end up staying true to their form and staying true to their source material and just give a little bit here and there to the cult? Let us know what you think about all that in the comment section down below. And if you'd like to support the channel, please check out the links in the description as well. So from Fandom Pulse over here, Games Workshop seems to be running into more problems than it goes into the holiday crunch with the holidays. It's been revealed even in England, where Games Workshop makes its brand home, a user has noted that the local store has rebranded to Game Store and has been eerily empty lately. Warhammer 40,000 came to the national attention in April when Games Workshop introduced female Adeptus Custodes to the property and the most recent Codex Adeptus Custodes, with an excerpt stating, Custodian Kaladis Torvaka Kesh stood upon the bridge of a Cobra-class destroyer named Vigilante Flame. The warship belonged to the mighty battlefield Solar. She lingered in the shadows of the back of the Bright, positioned at a spot where she could observe the actions of every crew member and be the instrument in pits in the armament shines. In the case of Shemaster Lep, stood ramrod against his command throne. So obviously this introduced the first female Custodian out there, right? And of course, there was a lot of backlash about this, because obviously there's plenty of examples of codexes throughout the history of Games Workshop that said that all of the Custodes were sons of the royals, they were sons of the high-end lords of Terra, and all that kind of stuff, and it refers to them as sons and sons and sons and sons over and over and over again, right? And so this is one of the big things. There was a lot of backlash, there was a lot of pushback. Games Workshop, their Twitter account out there decided to come out there and gaslight people and go, well, no, there's always been female Custodes. And we're like, well, wait a minute, that's not what any of the lore comes beforehand. So it was a big bunch of nonsense. There was a big controversy over that. There was a lot of issues, and of course, it didn't help since the first of the 10,000 were created. There's always been female Custodes. Well, where? There wasn't some like kind of crazy like story or lore out there where like, oh, we went to this distant planet and we found we found the home to an STC out there, and there was this undiscovered tomb of Custodes, and holy shit, the Emperor had actually made Custodes, and there'd be like some crazy like back lore reason as to why they get lost and why we'd never seen them. Instead, they just go, no, they've always been here. And that, I think, was the biggest kind of slap in the face. You could come up with a good story and a good excuse to make a female custody out there. Instead, you just ramrod it into a codex out there, and then tell anybody that disagrees with it, or tells you anybody that points out all the lore factors that all of this is not necessarily true. They'll go, oh, no, they've always been there. They've always been there. And of course, there was a lot of backlash. A lot of people had issues over that. Hell, we made some really big videos that absolutely blew up over all of that kind of controversy out there. And guess what? They should be called out to this, because this is the problem, boys and girls. And I know there's a lot of people out there like, well, this isn't a problem. You're detected. The problem is this is a red flag, right? And this is what we've tried to tell people. We have watched this happen in fandom after fandom. These red flags pop up and they end up destroying things. We saw it in Star Wars, and we saw it in Star Wars out there, right? With all the kind of stuff with the introducing of Rey and Finn, and then Finn just ended up being a bait and switch and ended up being all about Rey, and all that kind of done stuff, which put a lot of sour taste in the fans' mouths out there. I mean, we've seen that kind of thing out there when they go, oh, diversity, inclusion, and equity. And that's what, I mean, look at the fact, Eternals, right? Eternals, they told us on the red carpet that Eternals was going to save lives because of all of their diversity, inclusion, and equity. And that's all that mattered. And what happened? That movie ended up being nothing more than a hot pile of steaming garbage mess. Once again, we can go back to video games, right? As well. Star Wars Outlaws, right? They were like, oh, diversity, we've got this female protagonist and yada, 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 and all this other nonsense. What happened to that game? It came out as a broken and buggy mess, right? Why? They were red flags because it had a female protagonist in a Star Wars game out there, right? And everybody's like, oh, you're sexist, you're this, that, and the other. Or when you said to race swap or gender swap characters, or you do any of this kind of stuff, or you try to insert something and then try to gaslight all your people saying, well, it's always been like that. Guess what? That is a giant red flag of things to come, boys and girls. And if you don't put your foot down, if you don't tell Games Workshop exactly what you think of this, they will continue to go down this path. And guess what? We've seen what happens to the video game industry. We saw what happened to Hollywood, right? Go woke, go broke exists for a reason. Diversity, inclusion, and equity leads to one thing and one thing only: tens of billions of dollars in losses. And if Games Workshop continues to go down that pathward and continues to force this, I mean, what happens? Boys and girls, you say that right now. Wait, this is what's going to happen. If you do not push back against this female custody thing now, you will have female space marines. And you know what? Maybe you're okay with it. But I know there's a whole lot of Warhammer 40k fans that are not. So that was one of the big controversies, and that controversy actually caused their stock to plunge as a result to it because of all the backlash and because of all the PR out there. So obviously this is all stuff been called out. We've gone over all of this kind of stuff and everything else. So while Henry Cavill unveiled the brand would be moving forward from games IP to movie franchises this month, it appears that the tabletop gaming model is losing steam everywhere. Games Workshop has boasted 543 stores worldwide, with most of those coming from the United States and the UK, with product carried in more than 6,000 stores. However, some gaming hobbyist locations are no longer carrying the product. 2 stores this year very publicly announced that they were going to stop carrying product. One even stating that they are canceling more than $12,000 of orders, which is no light blow for the company. I mean, Games Workshop isn't some billion-dollar company out there, right? $12,000 is a big hit. So that's 2 companies, that's 2 stores that have publicly said that they're going to do this, and now there's a third reported from this YouTuber. Now, like I said, this is all anecdotal evidence. Have we seen a mass campaign of this? No. I have a 40k shop in my town right here. I have a Warhammer store in my town, but it's one of the franchise ones, so I don't think that one's going to change anytime soon. But we'll have to wait and see what happens. I honestly, I haven't been over there in a very long time to even check in on them because it's in a bad place with lots of traffic and all kinds of other reasons. But needless to say, it's not a good sign. Now a YouTuber has revealed that a local Games Workshop in the UK has rebranded itself to a game store to try to distance itself from the brand. So this is YouTuber David Watkiss. Now, obviously, this is completely and totally anecdotal. We have no way to verify this. We have no way to true this. This is just a comment on a YouTube video, but nonetheless, it's still an example of things that are going on out there. I mean, honestly, why would he lie, right? My local Games Workshop is rebranded and is now just Game Store. And they have been empty since the female Custodes crap. And this is in England. I mean, this is what's going to happen. You put a bad taste in your mouth of your people out there, and they are going to remember that, especially in such the hypersensitive time that we find ourselves in right now. Don't believe me? Look at the gaming industry and what happened with Sweet Baby Inc., right? Every single game that Sweet Baby Inc. touched completely and totally flopped. Whether it deserved to or not, right? It did, because it had that stain, it had that stink, it had that stain, it had that taint on it, and we'd seen what happened with Sweet Baby Inc. and everything that they'd done. I mean, the Suicide Squad goes the Justice League from Warner Brothers game, that game did absolutely abysmal and completely canceled it. Concord, another SBI game out there, flopped miserably. We see what the kind of fruits that these people produce. If you're concentrating on diversity, inclusion, and equity, and you decide to gaslight your customers, well, it means you're not concentrating on the things that are important to the game. And Games Workshop could end up going down that path unless people make their voices heard. And that's why all of this stuff is going on. But now here's the positive. Like I said, there's bad things going on, but there's also some good things. Their stock, their investors are clearly thinking this is going to end up going well. So while actual gaming seems to be down, it appears as if Games Workshop might be relying on its film business model to make it go. Despite a slide in its stock in April after the female Custodes turned off a lot of gamers, Games Workshop saw its stock rebound from its loss and more with Prime Video streaming series' announcement from Henry Cavill. The stock is currently sitting at more than 40% increase year to date, with a large portion of gains coming around the time of the announcement. Boy, who says it wasn't a mistake to not invest in Games Workshop earlier? But of course, I'm not a financial advisor. But I mean, look at that. $178. I mean, it was $120 right there Wednesday, May 8th. And now look at it now. I mean, that is just absolutely insane. So, I mean, 6 months ago, if you would have bought stock in this 8 months ago, I mean, look where you would kind of jump. You would have added like another 40% to your stock price. That's absolutely incredible. And like you said, you can go back to the little March time frame right here. You can see the dip right here in March, right when all the Custodes kind of nonsense came, and then of course slowly started to recover, and then of course it dropped back down here in May with all the kind of craziness that was going on, and then of course now we're back up and just up and down and up and down, and of course because as more and more of the Henry Cavill stuff got announced, as more of the speculation was going on, and boom, Henry Cavill announcement, spark right there. So the market seems to think that the hobbyists in games might not matter for the long-term viability of the company, which may prove true as the brand expands into Hollywood. And honestly, I don't think that's the case. I don't think that's ever been the case. I don't think any company has ever really truly survived moving into all of that kind of stuff. I mean, I guess you could argue that Marvel and DC to a certain degree kind of have, but honestly, when you see the kind of results that DC, especially in the movies over the last decade and the kind of stuff that has happened, it's not a sustainable market, right? And at the end of the day, what comes down to is you have to pay attention to your core audience, right? You have to pay attention to the people that have made your franchises great to begin with, right? And that's always been your hardcore nerds. It's always been your hardcore geeks. It's always been your hardcore gamers. Why? Because those are the people that are passionate about it. And if you have ever met a nerd or a geek or a gamer who is passionate about something and they love it and they enjoy it, they are the best promoter you could possibly ever have, because they will literally, you walk up to somebody and go, hey man, I don't know about this, and this, but I hear you're a fan. Oh, boys and girls, you better have brought your lunch. You better pull up a bar stool because you are going to be there for a while. All right. They will brown you. They will beat you over the head with more information than you could ever possibly want. You'll probably end up being more confused, but you'll be more informed at the exact same time, having even more questions to be able to dig deeper and dive more into the lore and in the fandom that they've introduced you to. And that's how that works. But if you don't keep those people happy, I promise you will end up seeing what happens. I mean, think about this. Star Wars, right? Star Wars' hardcore fans had 3 movies and a whole bunch of novels and a whole bunch of video games, but those novels and those video games and comic books kept that franchise going and in the cultural zeitgeist for decades. George Lucas didn't have to produce a bunch of movies every few years. He had that hardcore fandom, had that hardcore brand. And why? Because even in the books, they stuck to the stories, they stuck to the lore. George had his certain rules that you could mess with and certain ones you couldn't. And of course, that made it a billion-dollar franchise. I mean, that was a money printer go brr when it came to franchise and marketing out there. But then we saw what happened when Disney bought it, right? As soon as Disney bought it and they tried to switch it over to a girls brand, right? They tried to switch things over, which feels like what they're doing with Warhammer 40k with introducing female Custodes. I mean, apparently the Sisters of Battle, the nuns with guns weren't enough for you guys out there. Of course not, because they want to take everything, right? That's the problem with this cult. They ask for an inch and then they want to take a mile, right? They were like, well, there's just some females. Okay, you got the nuns with guns. Well, why not a female Custode? Well, why not a female Space Marine? That's how it always ends up going. That's how they go. That's why you can't let this infection in. It's a cancer. It spreads and it tries to consume more and more and more. And that's exactly what happened with Star Wars, right? Kathleen Kennedy was a cancer that got in charge of Star Wars, right? And then you started out with the Force movie, which literally just felt like a rehash of The New Hope. And then you had The Last Jedi, and then you had the Rise of Palpatine. And it's gotten worse and worse. You had like one little bright spot with like Mandalorian season 1 and 2. And then ever since then, everything's gone down farther and farther. And it's because this infection took root. So believe me or not, disagree with me or not, by all means, leave me all the comments and all the hate you want to at the bottom of the bottom of the video out there. But at the end of the day, history doesn't just repeat itself; it also rhymes. The reason why people are out there calling out the female Custodes stuff is because we have seen this happen time and time again. And you're right. You know what? Maybe your favorite fandom out there, maybe your favorite hobby out there is safe from all this. Maybe it won't go too far. Maybe it won't, and maybe it'll just stop at female Custodes. Maybe it'll just stop at female Space Marines. Maybe it'll all be okay, and you guys will just end there. But boys and girls, when has that ever happened? Give me one shining example of any major industry, any major franchise out there that has capitulated to this cult, has given way to it, and then it ended up recovering or ended up being okay and ended up only going so far. There isn't a single example of that. I mean, look at the state of Dungeons and Dragons right now. It is nothing more than activist diversity, inclusion, and equity nonsense. And you know what? That's the big fear that a lot of us have with this Amazon series from Henry Cavill. Even though Henry Cavill's supposed to be in charge, he's supposed to be on board, he's supposed to be very happy, we know what kind of person Jennifer Sulky is. She's the reason why Rings of Power is the way it is. She's the reason why Wheel of Time is the way it is. These people are an infection and they are a cancer. And if fans of Warhammer are not careful, the exact same thing will happen with Games Workshop. So call them out, be a fan, make your voices heard, and keep an eye on all of this kind of stuff out there. But for all of you Warhammer 40k or all of you Games Workshop stock investors, congratulations. It sounds like the announcement worked out very, very well for you, and I'm glad you've made some money. But at the end of the day, if this infection takes root and it spreads across the entire company like a cancer, I promise you, go woke, go broke will prove just as true for Games Workshop as it has for everything else in history. After all, history doesn't just repeat itself, it also rhymes, boys and girls.